A while ago, I was asked to give my testimony, and as I thought about what I would say, I thought I would share with you how God has transformed me over the years, how He has changed me. God is a God of transformation. In Genesis chapter 1, God changed darkness into light. In John chapter 3, Jesus says we must be born again. We have to be transformed or changed, filled with the Spirit of God so that we can enter into the kingdom of God. In 1 Corinthians 15, the Apostle Paul tells us that in the twinkling of an eye, we will be changed. We will be transformed into immortal bodies so that we can live our lives in eternity with God. So God is about transformation. And so I just wanted to share with you how God has been at work in my life, how He has worked to change the way I think, change the way I do things, change the way I behave. The way God changes us is through moments, and so I wanted to share with you a few moments in which God has been at work in my life. The first one is in the spring of 1974. I'm in the high school cafeteria, and we all know the drama that goes with the high school cafeteria. I was in the lunch line getting a carton of milk, and the reason why I was getting a carton of milk was because I had to have milk to go with my tasty cakes. Now, if you're from the Philadelphia area, this needs no explanation. But if you're not from the Philadelphia area, tasty cakes are precious. They are like gold. They're like Hostess, Twinkies, and cupcakes, but way better. And nothing goes better with tasty cakes than milk. So I'd gone to get my milk, and I had come back to my seat where I was expecting to see my lunch and my tasty cakes, and someone had taken my tasty cakes. Yeah, someone had stolen my tasty cakes. So I stood there, and I swore a blue streak. And sitting across the table was Dan Jenkins. Now, Dan was a fellow soccer player, and I had actually witnessed to him earlier that school year. And Dan folds his arms and sits back and says, "How can you call yourself a Christian and talk like that?" Well, that hit me square between the eyes, because at that point I knew I had to make a decision. Either I was going to continue to try to be a cool kid, or I was going to be the Christian that I professed being. And I decided I would be the Christian that I professed being. Fast forward now to the spring of 1987. I'm lying on my back, and I'm in the upper field at Landmark School. I'm stretching out to go for a run. And I'm thinking about a student in particular who had had a really traumatic experience at home, and I'm trying to think, how is he coping? How is he managing? Because when I was a teenager, I went to God with everything. And I didn't have any reason to think that he had a faith, but there was certainly nobody at school who represented faith, who represented God. And I had been thinking about maybe being a chaplain at Landmark, because there wasn't one. And in that moment, God said, "I want to bless this place." And in that moment, I knew what that meant. I knew what that meant in terms of me being a chaplain and the decades of service that it would require. So now fast forward to the spring of 1996. I had been through seminary. I had spent 5 years at Landmark. I hadn't established a chaplaincy yet. Why? Because I was busy thinking that I would use my degree to use it for more aspiring things, like being a chaplain at St. Mark's or St. Paul's in Concord, or maybe being a pastor of a church. But in the spring of 1996, I'm in the boys' room and I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and I think to myself, this is it. This is where I'm supposed to be. This is the perfect fit. What am I doing? Like, remember when God called you to be a chaplain 9 years ago? So that spring I proposed the chaplaincy, and it was like an apple falling out of a tree. And then the following year I began the program. So now, fast forward to 2017. I had received my third letter from this specific church that wanted me to be its pastor. Now, in all my growing up, Everyone expected me to be a pastor. My parents expected me to be a pastor. My grandparents bought me a robe when I graduated from seminary. And here I am, 60 years old, and I'm still not a pastor. Didn't know that I really wanted to be a pastor. And this was troubling. This was very troubling because my dad expected me to be a pastor, and I still wasn't a pastor. But what I realized over the course of time, I had told them no for the third time. But what I realized was I don't have the disposition to be a pastor. I don't have the personality to be a pastor, and that was disappointing because I wasn't who I thought I was. But what God was doing was He was changing me, helping me to understand who I really was. And as I came to understand who I really was, I understood that, hey, I'm a chaplain at Landmark, and that's a perfect fit for me. And with that came the joy and the peace of not trying to be somebody that I wasn't. Fast forward now to October of 2020, and I met the woman with whom I could share my true self. I could finally be married to somebody who I didn't have to try to be something that I wasn't. And so the point I'm making in all of this is that through all these years, God has been working in my life to change me from being someone who was always trying to be someone that He wasn't, to being who He created me to be, and I'm convinced has created me to be, or has transformed me to be someone more like Christ. So, thanks be to God.